Okay, so I'm back, and it looks like we're in good shape tonight. What we're going to do, I've got an archive started. We are going to start with a quick interview or an interview with Malte Holm. Malte is the Director of Innovation and Marketing for Grupo Entero out of Guatemala. He's originally from Denmark. Malte, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at? Just kind of give us a little bit about your background and your history to kind of get us started, and then I'll follow up with some additional questions. For the rest of you, if you've got questions, please go ahead and enter your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll bring you into the talk if we can enable the talk button. Okay? So, Malte, go ahead and give us some background.
Okay. Hi, Bill. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good night, and well, thanks for having me as well. It's been great. I saw Bill not too long ago down here in Guatemala, and he invited me to be on tonight, which I'm very happy to join you guys. So thanks for having me as well. So I guess probably like a short background. I'm originally I've been in business pretty much the main part of my life. Graduated from back in Denmark in business administration with a minor in marketing was a big issue, but the major was really in strategy. So that's where I came from. Worked in Denmark for a lot of years in biotechnology. Worked for a company that was actually facilitating transactions between biotech companies and major pharma companies. So kind of mixing the pipelines, buying new products, and so on. So I worked for a company that facilitated that. Came to Guatemala for about 6 years ago. Actually, initially I just came here to learn Spanish. My deal was to stick around for 2 or 3 months, study a lot, and then basically go back and continue working in Denmark. But as Bill knows, and as you will know as well, I met my now wife after about 2 months. So you can imagine the plan changed pretty harsh from there. So I've been here since then. As Bill said, I've been working for a few companies here. I've also been doing a few ventures on my own. Right now I'm working for Grupo Entero, which is it's actually a corporation, so I'm in the corporate office overseeing what is innovation and also marketing and the more commercial activities. So yeah, I mean, just so you know a little bit about Grupo Entero, we have a very, very broad portfolio, which if you saw the video, I think we explained a little bit about it in the background interview I did with Bill back here in Guatemala. But we're in everything from construction through financing. We have a dental clinic concept as well. We buy gold in another business unit. So it's a very, very diverse portfolio. And especially the topic that's on for tonight about identifying the clients and the right fit for the business is something we work on a lot. So I hope I can add some value to the discussion as well this night.
Well, great. Well, thank you. And I guess the thing that is very intriguing about what you're doing now is, and I remember when I was down there a couple of years ago, it was in 2010, and you, I think, were in the process of just getting this job, and it was that title, Director of Innovation. You know, what does a Director of Innovation do? I mean, it's a very intriguing title to have somebody that is, I guess, constantly looking for new ways to go about doing business. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. I mean, marketing we're a little more familiar with, but the Director of Innovation.
Sure. Well, I guess there's a little difference between, we have a few directors as well overseeing innovation in our business unit. So let me just talk a little about what they do, and then also where I fit in that equation. But really, I guess a director of innovation is obviously the leader of the innovation for a corporation or for a business unit. And the way we see it in the business units is that the director in every company is actually the driver, the person that should always be on the lookout for new ways to do things, new processes, and basically always challenging the way we do business. So we normally work with a portfolio where we have different projects in the pipeline, constantly looking ahead, saying, so what could be happening in this industry? How do we challenge looking at new ways to expand the channels, new ways to use the existing channels, but also looking into new segments, right? So you could say, well, I mean, Sometimes we'll be looking at one customer segment that we already know, that we already work with, and we'd be looking at ways to do something better or improve. But there might be other ways as well where we could expand into, well, new businesses, but within the existing business, or even change business models, right? So we've been talking about this before with Bill as well, but innovation is a very broad topic, I'd say. There's a lot of ways you can define it. There's a lot of ways people think about it, but what a director of innovation would do in Grupo Entero is it's the person that drives change within the organization. We're constantly on the lookout for these new ways or better ways to serve our clients, and it's the person that should always have the client as the center focus of the whole organization. So that's very important. So from there in the business units and up to what I do, I also do that as well. I do consult a lot of the business units, try and be out there every now and then to help them. But what is important as well is what we do here in corporate is that we look for new systems. So, for example, and I was telling Bill about this some months ago, we use a methodology called design thinking as kind of the center piece of our innovation here, which is a customer-driven way of looking at innovation. So what I do here in corporate, there's a lot of lookout for new processes, new ways we can do this, but it's more focused on the systems and the processes behind how to execute it, not so much as for what are the projects. So I'd be looking constantly for new ways we can improve that process, looking out for new ways we can better expand the portfolios, better ways to measure the portfolios. And of course, I mean, every now and then I will get a bright idea here and there or see something that might inspire something in the business unit. But I normally, in my role, push that out to the folks that are out there, and they would be the ones executing. So that's the way we see a director of innovation at the corporate level versus someone that would be more on the execution side, actually doing the projects. So does that answer the question, Bill?
Yeah, I think very well. And Dion Oliver had asked, is it similar to continuous improvement? And I think it was pretty clear that that's certainly part of it. I think the connection that I'm intrigued with too, and is that connection to the market. Where this group of students are is they've been working with their own individual idea, and Malte will be happy to hear that they're going to be doing a 1-minute elevator pitch by the end of this week as their project for this week. So the what do we call it? The El Fuego, the Jaguar or something like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So they're working on that as well. The linkage to the target market, when you come up with a clever idea or a clever business model, how much market research do you do, or do you go about testing it with customers? How do you go about identifying which customers are most likely to embrace this innovation or benefit from it that then becomes a competitive advantage? Tell us a little bit about the customer side and what you're kind of looking for in terms of making that linkage.
Okay, sure. Well, I think that what's really important about the way we do innovation is that we're not so much focused on having this group of brilliant people or the lonely genius that's the person that gets in a room and just basically figures out a lot of new things and then pushes it out. So we'll actually take a step back and would say, so first of all, who's the client, right? Like, who's the client that if we are working on an existing business, we would probably know more or less who it is. And we would look at, okay, so is there a better way we can do something with this client? Is there some opportunities? Have someone in the organization identified maybe a problem? What options would there be to do something better, right? To drive change as well? So what we would normally do, let me give you an example, say in one of our dental clinics. That might be an opportunity where we see lack of capacity to attend the people. We would have to have them waiting in line. Sometimes we wouldn't be able to attend them the same week. We would have to move them to next week because we're fully booked or something like that. So that might be like an initial indicator that there's an opportunity, definitely, right? And that would only be an opportunity if we think it's something that would be good for the client, because we put the client first, right? We believe if the client is happy, that will generate the revenues in the long term that will also create the revenues that our stockholders are looking for, right? So it's a kind of a circle that, one goes with the other. So if we go back to that example, what we would normally do is we'd start to identify obviously what the challenge is. We put together a team that would be looking at this, and we always try to look at a multidisciplinary team as well. So we have not just the innovation genius or the expert or something like that on board, but we actually have a very diverse team and a mixture of people that can bring different things to the table, right? That's what we look for. So that would be the starting point. Then what we would do is we would always start with a big part of what we call the empathy part, which is basically you have to understand what the client is looking for, or how the client is feeling about your company, about your service or your product. And the only way you can really do that is at some point putting yourself in their shoes, right? So there are a lot of ways you can do that. What we normally try to do is we try to mix different techniques. So we would definitely do some interviews, which is a very, very common technique. You can mix interviews as well with focus groups if you want to have more people in the same table. But what we do try to do a lot is that we try to get out there with the clients. We try and experience what their lives look like. We might go back to the dental example. We might go and follow one of these folks a day or two, stay with them. Maybe not sleep over, but maybe spend a day with them. See where do these guys where do they move about? Like what are they thinking? What cars do they drive? How do they get around? How do they pay for their bills? Do they use credit cards? Do they pay cash? And that might give you a lot of new ways of looking at this problem, right? So there's a lot of focus on the client, and a different point could also be just maybe just sitting in the clinic, and we could even do that by watching the video surveillance. We could be there physically, but sometimes the pure observation is a method that's very overlooked, I think, because people focus so much on interviewing the person, right? And getting back to the point, right? I think what can happen sometimes is that if we focus too much on just sending out one person, so saying, this is the innovation guy, let him figure it out, we might miss a lot of this stuff, right? So the worst case scenario would be you have one person doing a project and the person is only doing interviews because we just want to ask the people and try to figure out that way. So we focus on the client, but if we limit ourselves to just doing the interviews, you'll have a lot of situations where the client's not really sure, or they might not be able to articulate exactly what they're looking for, right? And I think an example, maybe you might have heard it a million times, but I love this example, which is someone would ask you, I guess most of you have been to a circus sometime in your life, and so would it be interesting to go to a circus, where actually this time we don't have any animals, the circus doesn't have any, but we've done some nice costumes, we put them on some folks, so they actually look like animals. And well, we didn't do a lot of clowns. We took out the clown element as well. But by the way, the venue's very nice. There's really good music, and it'll be a blast, right? And it'll just cost you about $150 versus the $10 you would pay for a normal circus, right? So I mean, if you go about it that way, people would say, no thanks, right? I'm not really interested into that, because that's something we created without really, maybe asking the client or understanding what they value, right? But again, right, going back to this, I mean, Cirque du Soleil, right? That's their model. So you can't really just ask the person if they would like this and just create this kind of thing and then just push it out and see what they like. Sometimes they wouldn't even know, right? So this is a good way of starting this process and getting out there, talking to the people, just observing them, spending some time with them, understanding what their needs are, right? What their feelings are, what problems they have. And I mean, this is something that will give you, as just a pure example about the dental concept, is that we actually discovered that a lot of people had problems paying for certain types of these dental treatments, right? So this is not something they always tell you, right? Because they wouldn't necessarily want to tell us about their personal financial problems and stuff, but by spending a day with them or observing them in the clinic or actually putting yourself in their shoes and going through the process, that helps you a lot to understand like how can you really serve this need, right, and what the need is. So that's where it all starts.
Oh, that's great. And I was just noting in the chat section that what you're talking about is one of the examples from the Blue Ocean strategy where, effectively Cirque du Soleil really redefined the whole concept of a circus. They essentially said, okay, that's what you've been doing forever, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do something completely different. And, how many of you guys have been to Cirque du Soleil or seen them on TV? Give me a check mark if you have, or an X. Okay, we've got at least one Malte. Yeah. Okay. Larissa has been. Yeah, they were here in Atlanta, I guess a couple of times, and we've seen them several different places. But and they're often on TV, and it's well worth watching. And it does blow your mind when it's described kind of the way that Malte described it. You kind of sit back and say, well, shoot, I can go see 5 things or do 5 different things rather than pay the big bucks for this one. And yet, it is really truly an exceptional experience, and that's what they're shooting for, is an exceptional experience, not just a circus. And I guess one of the main messages to kind of pull out there as it relates to your projects is, you've all got interesting, workable projects. There's not one out of the 32 projects or so that you guys are working on that can't be done, including the nonprofits. And why do I know that? Well, because they've already, by and large, been done. The key thing is to sit back and take a look at what's been done, understand what's working, and then also look and see what can you do that differentiates yourself. And that's kind of a strong word in a way, because you may not have to differentiate yourself in some markets. You may simply have to execute in some markets. It may be a new market opportunity. And what you may be able to do is literally take an idea from another place and apply it to a new market, and voila, you've got opportunity, you've got business. So, but trying to understand what are the things that we can do, what are the things that we can do exceptionally well, and what are the things that we can do better is really one of the key aspects to this whole process.
Bill, let me just add a point to that as well, which I did not mention, and I think that's very important. If you guys haven't read the Blue Ocean and that part, it's very applicable to this kind of innovation part, which is remember to talk to people that do not use this service as well, because what always happens is that we would focus these focus groups and the personal interviews on, like the typical client, right? So you want to start a business that sells shoes, you would go to talk to a person that buys a lot of shoes, right? That's pretty straightforward, and we do that all the time. But it is important to remember, and what we do is, I mean, this is just a tip you can use, right? We do try to keep in these processes, keep three segments basically. So we would definitely talk to the super user, say the guy who just loves to go to the circus, to go back to the example, right? So we'd also talk to the more average user, maybe the person that goes 1 or 2 times in a lifetime, not a particularly super user of the circus, if that was the example. But then also go back and talk to the people who don't, right? Which is exactly what Cirque du Soleil did, and that's why they've been so successful, right? Because they figured out like why the people, as Bill put here, why don't they go to the circus, for example, right? And they figured out that a lot of people that don't, well, they do something else, right? But they just maybe not look for the elephants. They might not look for all those things, right? And again, going back to this, right? That's how we've been successful in a lot of businesses by figuring out why, not necessarily to copy an existing concept, but also figuring out people who don't use something like this. Well, why not, right? What's the problem that's underlying this situation, and what can we do about it to make people try it and maybe keep coming back to it, right?
No, exactly. And there's another company, and I'm trying to remember the name of the company. I was talking to your wife, Maria. Malte's wife, Maria, is a director of marketing for a company that sells and distributes wine throughout Central America. And the other company, it's got a kangaroo on the bottle, and I'm just drawing a blank. But it's another excellent example of a company that stepped into an industry that's well developed, the industry for wine, Yellowtail. Thank you, Malt. And how many of you are Yellowtail drinkers or have bought a bottle of Yellowtail from your local supermarket? Yellowtail wine. Well, they essentially followed the blue ocean approach as well, and they were very clever. They got away from some of the snobbery, if you will, in terms of having these sophisticated labels and vineyards and all that sort of stuff, and they just went with a good quality wine at a decent price. And when they first started out, they just had red and they had white, and they positioned it in supermarkets. And I think initially you could buy it for around $7 a bottle or $6 a bottle. It may be a little bit higher price now, and they are broadening out category-wise into different, more varieties, if you will. But they identified an opportunity. They saw an industry, quite frankly, it was quite complex. And I know, I can walk in and I'm not a very sophisticated wine drinker, but I can tell you after living in Europe for 5 years, I got more sophisticated. But you walk in to the average wine shop or supermarket, and you may be presented with literally 50 to 100 bottles of wine. And how are you supposed to know which ones are good? And there's these rating systems and all that sort of stuff, but even the rating systems are kind of convoluted. You may see a lot of 8s or 80s or whatever that suggest it's pretty good. You see price points all over the map, and very confusing to the average, relatively unsophisticated consumer. And they made sure that it was a decent tasting wine, simple labels, very recognizable, bright colors on the label. And even though I couldn't remember the Yellowtail name, it's just probably an aging thing, I could certainly remember the kangaroo. It was on there. And so, the idea that they were simplifying a very complex purchasing decision and following through, with a good value bottle of wine, and the idea that, taking something complex, making it a lot easier to do, and then positioning themselves through supermarkets, at the end of the day, it's proven to be extremely brilliant. The vineyard itself has been around for, I guess, 40 or 50 years, or maybe even longer, so it's not a new company in that sense. But somewhere along the line in the past decade or so, they came up with a very clever approach, and it's worked spectacularly well to the point now where they have some direct competition who even use the same kangaroo style label in an attempt to try to go after the market. So just another example that you'll find in the Blue Ocean strategy if you look for that kind of stuff. What else, Malt, in terms of the marketplace is important? I mean, how much detail should you have? Is it important? I'm a professor, so I can be accused of trying to drive my students crazy on the one hand, and on the other hand, pushing them maybe to get even more explicit and clearer. But is it really important to have a pretty good feel for the size of the opportunity, and is it really important to kind of know? We talk about a little bit about demographics, a little bit about psychographics and behavior. Is it important to know that stuff about your clients?
Well, I think there are some points, that are definitely important, right? I understand that what you folks are looking at right now is basically, from the incubator, from the beginning of the business model and getting that to market, right? So definitely, I think it's important to estimate an opportunity, right? But again, what's very common, and I've seen this a lot of times, is that people, they kind of estimate a market just based on, whatever feeling we have, a gut feeling or something, and then basically most people want to try and capture between 5 and 10% of that opportunity, right? So that's pretty much always the number I see. So what we would do differently is that we try and identify the need first, right? Before, obviously you probably have done that, right? You've been through these processes, you've been seeing some opportunities in the marketplace. But what you should do first is take that opportunity and figure out what you're going to do about it, right? Go out there, make sure you do that empathy very well with the users, figure out where the needs are, and how you can do something about that, right? Because then what will happen is, and this goes back to the innovation part as well, is that what you should do, instead of spending a lot of time figuring out, making the dimension of the market, how big is it, how much can I capture, you probably wouldn't know that, right? At the starting point, you can do a very educated guess, but it won't be exact, right? That's what we will always learn. So what we do different is that we try and prototype very early in the process. So we normally, right after that empathy piece, we start building prototypes, and I'm talking about quick and dirty prototype, right? And I'm not nothing sophisticated, something that the user would be able to tear apart, and you wouldn't feel bad about it. And then just basically get back to them and start testing it, right? So that's what we do all the time. I mean, if it's a new business unit, if it's a new concept completely, we would do this, and we would try and do it as cheap as we can, right? So we would figure out what is the cheapest way and the fastest way to figure out if this is a viable solution or not, right? So the way you go about that is that you would create some kind of hypotheses and figure out what is it that you would like to know. So maybe you wouldn't be able to estimate if you're going to be successful, or if you're going to capture 10% of the market, and if the market is $1 billion, or if it's 100 million, or how big it is. But at least you can figure out what is it that I want to learn from each phase in this process. So if I have something, I can push it to the market, I can try it, it's quick, it's dirty, I know that, but what would I like to know after this experiment, right? So that was something that I think the Yellowtail folks did very well as well, right? I mean, they had an insight that was, as Bill mentioned, people, they don't know how to choose. And I think another thing the book mentions as well is that a lot of people didn't actually know how to open a bottle of wine, right? So that was a problem as well, right? So I mean, there are ways they could prototype that. They could create a different bottle. They could test it with the users, see if it worked for them, if it was something attractive or not. And you can get some feedback very fast, right? So I would counter that to something where you would spend a lot of time doing a lot of field work. You'd spend a lot of time researching, getting numbers, getting studies done, and so on, to just write something in a plan, right? Because I mean, it is important to plan, but it is also very, very important to try and put all this stuff, or put your product or your service in the hands of the users. If it is a product, something you can touch and feel, well, getting the prototype in their hands, right? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a service. Sometimes it's more of a concept that you like. And there are ways you can test that as well, right? There'll be storyboards. You can tell a story. You can make a short video. There are several ways you could go about that. But I think it's very important at this initial phase that, of course, you need to have an understanding, right? What does this industry look like? Because if you're trying to sell something that might not even be a market for, might not be that interesting, right? But again, I mean, if you start with the customer, you put the customer in the center, a lot of times that won't happen, because you will have a very good feeling talking to a lot of people, understanding them, watching what they do, how they go about this issue that you've identified in the beginning, and take it from there little by little, right? So you take that prototype, testing, refining mentality, and just keep doing that, right? So how we go about it is that we see everything as a living prototype, and we have business units that's been around for years, and we still see those as somehow a prototype, because there's always something you can do better. There's always something you can change about it. So it's never stopping and saying, okay, we made it, now we're there, right? Now everything's perfect, and I think that's a very, very important mindset that you have to change from the beginning, and make sure that people are on the same boat when you do that, right? So that everyone has that mindset, everyone's looking for prototyping and testing it with the users from the beginning, but also doing that constantly throughout the process, right? So I think it is important to plan, it is important to know what the opportunity looks like, but it's also very, very important that you don't keep it on a paper, you don't keep it just in your head, but get it out there, right? Get some feedback from the users and see what works, what doesn't work, and then build on that.
All right, great. Well, let me turn it around and just see if any of you guys have any questions for Malte at this stage. If you do, and if you want to, you can either use the audio capability if you want to just jump right in, or chat. Sometimes Malte takes about 30 seconds or so to kind of get a question put out there, so we'll just kind of sit still for a second. It may also be possible that we don't have very many questions. Sometimes that happens as well. Usually once we get going, we do. But I think
even if you have any questions about your, sorry, Bill. I was just saying if anyone has a specific question to their project or something they're struggling with in any of these spaces, I mean that might be a good opportunity as well to look into something very hands-on right now, right?
Yep, perfect. Yeah, and I think one of the other things that we've got a couple people working on sort of not-for-profit enterprises as well. Larissa, Rebecca's not in here tonight, but there are 2 or 3 different not-for-profit organizations, and most of the ideas tend to be on the retail or services side, also. Although we do have a couple that are production oriented, in other words, manufacturing oriented. We've got one software company. It's a really good variety of companies, actually. We've got a cigar manufacturer with a different approach towards making a cigar. We've got people that are coming up with supply chain solutions, if you will, for the fish industry, or for servicing restaurants and that kind of stuff. So, the variety is quite impressive when you get right down to it in terms of the nature of the businesses. And it seems like everybody's doing really well. Anybody have a question? If not, then I think what I want to ask Malte to talk about a little bit is some of the challenges that you have as a company operating out of Central America. Which markets are you looking to go into? What are the real challenges that you're facing coming from Guatemala? But also, what are the opportunities, obviously, that present themselves when you're in essentially a third world environment that also has some very strong first world connections, obviously. But tell us a little bit about what it's like to do that. I mean, you're an expat. I'm not even sure that's the right term to call you anymore. But tell us about that.
Right. Well, I've been here long enough to see it from the local perspective, and I guess one of the big opportunities that you will see in most developing countries is that there are a lot of opportunities, right? I mean, what I see every day basically is a new business concept popping up somewhere in the environment here, which is basically just a copy of something that happened maybe in the States some 5 or 10 years ago, right? So I think what's attractive about these markets is that you have a high potential for growth. Sometimes you don't have to be that innovative, because there are so many opportunities that are already out there that they haven't been brought to market down here, and so that's happening quite a lot, right? I think something else that's also and obviously that's part of the market risk of being here, is that some of the more macro environments here are pretty unstable. So you'd have changing governments that might change a lot, so that the political course can change drastically. You would have corruption in a lot of the countries that we're located in, and also crime rates. There are some challenges to that as well. What's good about that is too that a lot of people don't really want to be here, right? So that's also that's a good thing if you're a local, if you know how to move in the markets here, because you'll have opportunities where some of the maybe the major global corporations, bigger companies, they might not want to look at a market like Guatemala and say, oh, that's attractive right now. They might be looking somewhere else, right? So there are a lot of opportunities to go about and starting something now. If you have an aggressive strategy, if you know how to go about it, you'll have a huge opportunity to build something very strong. And basically you could position yourself even just for an acquisition, right? If an international competitor at some point would like to go into these markets, and that might be very attractive as well. So just, I've seen during this last, maybe during the last year, we've seen a lot of concepts like the Groupon, all those marketing coupon sites popping up all over Central America. And that's been around for quite a few years in the States and also in Europe. So So basically, I know a few of those folks, and they've said it all, right? And all of them have mentioned that their big goal, the exit strategy is in a few years, and they look to be acquired, right, by some major competitor as well. So Bill, on another note, I would say as well that something, and this is something I had to learn the hard way, is that when you operate in a market where you're not familiar, where you didn't grow up necessarily, where you don't have your whole contact base and that network, which is so important in Latin America. I think that's maybe one of the strongest success indicators almost down here is how well connected you are. If you know the people in the right places to make sure you can do the right connections and do the right businesses, that is so important, right? And that's something coming from Europe, and I've been in the States as well. It is important, of course, right? Networking has always been and will always be very important, but it's not necessarily the factor that will determine if you're going to win a business or not, which it is a lot of times in these markets. So I think getting into the local climate as well, that can be a big challenge, right? And not underestimating the people here, not underestimating the market conditions, because it is a third world country, right? We had a situation like that actually with Bill, with some folks from Brunel as well, and they had some business plans around that were very good, right? But what we did identify sometimes was that they tended to underestimate a little bit how good people would be at negotiating here, and also how well they would know the value of the opportunity at hand, right? So it's not that easy just to come in as a foreigner and just say, okay, I can just buy something cheap and I know how to do things, because that's something you learn the hard way, right? You need to know how business is done here, and it's a lot more, relationships, having the right connections, having good lunches, and so on, versus just very, very strategic, very, very straight to the point, and so on. So which is basically how business is done in the States, right? So I think that's something that I pull out as one of the main things I've learned down here, and also something that's very different from the environment you guys would know in say the United States or further north in Canada or maybe towards Europe, right? More developed countries. That's an important piece to keep in mind, especially if some of you are looking to branch out to these countries, or if your suppliers would be here, or if you're somehow your supply chain is involving doing business with any third world country. That's important having that in mind.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really good point, and it's really, I would put it under the broader context of really networking and developing a strong network, especially in the markets you serve. Again, we have most everybody here is working on a concept that is probably locally based, whether it's in a state or in a particular region of a state or in a particular town for that matter. And yet the concepts are also those kind of concepts that could be developed so that they cut across different markets. And I think the consistent thing that I hear when I talk to people, like Malte, different parts of the world, that I think definitely does apply. And I think it, even in a structured society like we have in the U.S., where, there are bureaucracies and governmental processes that you have to predictably go through in order to do things like get certificates of occupancy for a building, or to get licenses to be able to operate a business. That kind of stuff. It's still relationships and the network that you develop to support what you're trying to do is absolutely critical. You're rarely going to find one person. And I think all you have to do is look at some of the iconic people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, as very iconic people that we think of when we think of very wildly successful entrepreneurs. And, they could not do it on their own. They had other people that were right by their sides. Steve Ballmer, who's the current president for Microsoft, was at Harvard with Bill Gates, as was Paul Allen. It was the three of them that was a winning combination, plus some other folks that kind of got that business off the ground and got it on that trajectory. Same thing with Steve Jobs. Again, it's never really just one person. It's really is a team. And the key thing is, if you find people with complementary strengths that you can pull together that share a common vision or a common mission, that at least can come together at the right moments and times, then you can minimize or eliminate most of your weaknesses. Just in my own experience, I tend to be very more strategic in my thinking. What makes or has made a lot of the situations that I've been involved in work is when I work with several other people that are more detail-oriented and more tactical. And as long as we get along, generally speaking, we don't have to be best friends, but as long as we get along, generally speaking, and as long as we can, reach agreement on the things that matter most to the business that we're in, then we can work exceptionally well together. And so I think, having that team and having that network that supports you, that shows, paves the way for you, shows you, takes you sometimes by the hand and says, here's the things that you need to do, or here, let me introduce you to this person. Sometimes it's about getting funds. Sometimes it's about identifying, market opportunities like customers. Sometimes it's, helping with some of the governmental regulations and that kind of stuff. That is a very critical aspect towards not only developing your business, but especially developing a sustainable business and one that has a lot of impact. So that's a great comment. Malte, any final comments or suggestions for our group? And while he's making them, if you do have any questions, now's a good time to ask. And as he said, it does not have to be limited just to some of the things he's touched on tonight. Malte's got a lot of good experience. I think I met him when he was finishing up his MBA 3-4 years ago as well. So he's been through your shoes more recently than I have, certainly. So Malte, if you got any final suggestions, comments?
Sure. I guess obviously you folks are all at the starting point right now, getting the business plan together, getting the content out there, figuring out what's working and what's not working. But I think getting back to Bill's point, it is crucial, right? Like getting the right team, and that's probably the most important thing you can do in a business, right? And that's the way we go about it as well. New business units, there's always a very high focus on who's going to be the leader for this project, what team is established to support this leader, and what role will they play, right? So we use a brain dominance map test, which is called the Ben Sticker test, for all our employees to kind of figure out how their dominance is, if they're more strategic thinkers, as Bill said, if they're more creative folks, if they're more, they might even be more just structured, right? People that would love to be in accounting, seeing things that are predictable. But it's very important to have that team, right? So you don't just have crazy thinkers on board, but also have the folks that can actually pull you back in and do the numbers and do the analysis. But something else that I think is important, which sometimes I see lacking a lot of in business plans, is a good understanding of how the business works. So this is where the financial modeling comes in, and having not just some kind of pro forma statement as for how the P&L statement will look like in the future, what kind of revenues are expected and how that's projected into the future, but also knowing what are the variables in your model, so in your financial model that actually moves this. So a good way of going about this is saying what are the variables that tie into whatever measurement you're using to measure the return on this investment, right? Which could be it could be internal rate of return. Some people use EVA. Some people use something like ROIC, if it's on invested capital, and so on. But if you can figure out a way to model all the variables in your business model and in the financial model and tie those into the final return number, then you can actually get a pretty good idea of which variables you have to move to make this business successful, right? And just to give you an example, what we've done, for example, in our dental business is that we've mapped out, say, for example, what is the capacity in a clinic, so and so much, but how many can we attend, and what is the goal that we're trying to go about? So we know if we can attend, say, 5 new patients a day versus 7, that's going to move the return rate so much. So if we go from 5 to 7, we know exactly what impact that will have. On another way we could look at it as well is that we could use other variables as well. For example, we have right now we have orthodoncy as a big project because we figured out that if we can move this little piece in the financial model, if we can sell more of those, that will actually move the number of return that we will get in the end quite a lot. So I think it's important not only to know what is it that you want to sell, what is the content, but also understanding what are the variables in the financial model that will make this go through the roof, right? What variables do you have to touch? Which ones are the most sensible as for the returns you can obtain, and how can you then create a plan to go about, create certain activities to make sure you try to move the most important ones and not just focusing on just selling anything, but figure out what is the stuff that will really make you get the right returns, and what are the variables in your financial model that will make this business successful, basically, right? And that's something a lot of people don't really try to map out from the beginning. It's also very hard, right? Because sometimes you're talking about projections, right? So you're talking about things that you don't know anything about yet. But even though it's just a projection, you can still create a model. You can sensibilize it a little bit so you can figure out what are the variables that are the most sensible ones, which makes the return rate move, and then focus on those, right? Don't focus on everything. Time is limited, energy is limited, and make sure you know what the Pareto is, right? What is the 20% of the activities that will get you the 80% of the earnings, right, of the sales. Make sure you focus on those. I think that's very, very important.
Okay, well, we've got several questions. The first one from Didi is, how long did it take from the time in which you earned your MBA to get into this particular business in Guatemala? And really to kind of further develop that question, Didi's just young, and she wanted to know if age can be a restriction or a drawback, or how can you overcome, I guess, maybe a bit of a lack of experience and age in terms of starting a business or in terms of networking?
Well, that's a great question. I think, and maybe I might be the right person to ask. I'm 28, so I guess I'm pretty young for where I am right now, and I think I've been thinking about that quite a few times, right? Thinking about what did I do, or was I just in the right spot at the right moment? I think something that, and this goes for everything in life, right? I think just make sure you just have a positive attitude towards whatever you're doing. Make sure you try and help people without expecting anything in return. And I think, well, good things pretty much attract good things, right? So there's almost always a correlation about this. But answering the question as well, I think I was finishing my MBA maybe like 6 months before I joined Grupo Entero. So I was actually working in another company, and this was by accident. I mean, I had positioned myself working in marketing. I've been working, as I mentioned even before earlier in Denmark, I worked in investment. So I think what the company here found attractive about my profile was that I had a lot of different experiences. I had been in sales, I had been in more strategic positions, I've been in marketing. And if you want to get someone for innovation, right, which is exactly what I do, might not be exactly where Didi is going, but I mean that's the kind of profile you'll be looking for. Someone that's been doing a lot of different things, probably someone that might have a little more creative profile, but also a strategic thinker that can bring these things to the market, that can bring this, that can execute, right? So I think probably one of the best tips I can give you is if you're doing something on your own, figure out what are the core strengths that you need to acquire, right? Try to do kind of a SWOT analysis on your own profile, right? Figure out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and not necessarily trying to work on your weaknesses. I think a lot of people do that, but I'd rather work on my strengths. And then going back to Bill's point earlier, trying to figure out what are the people that can complement you so that your weaknesses are no longer an issue, right? Because you would either be able to use systems to just not have those weaknesses anymore, or you would have other people on your team if you're doing an entrepreneurial enterprise yourself that would be able to do some of the stuff that you don't do that well. And also, if that's not the way you're going, right? If you're not taking the entrepreneurial road, I think it's very important to start with the end in mind, right? Figuring out where would you like to be. Ask yourself, what would you like to be in 5 years? Where would you like to be in 10 years? And try and figure out people that might be in that position. What would they look like? How would they act? Maybe what would they have done in their careers? What people would they have been looking towards? And making sure you start networking with those folks, right? There are a lot of ways you can do that. LinkedIn is a great resource, a lot of groups you can join and so on. So try and figure out where would you like to be, right? Ask yourself that question, even though you're doing an enterprise on your own, right? Where would you like to be? And and what does it take to get there? Try and map that out, and then you can go about it very strategically, right? Figuring out, okay, so what do I have to do to get there, right? I did that quite a lot when I was in my MBA. I had the fortune to be, I was with a lot of people that were in successful positions, and talking to them, right? How did you get there? What did you do? And getting that network as well, right? Sometimes people are a little afraid of stepping up and asking the folks about how did you get there, or maybe you're afraid to talk to them or something. But what I found is every time I reach out to someone asking them about something, even though I don't know them, people tend to respond very positively. I mean, they want to help you. If you seem like a nice person, they would want to help you, right? So I think don't be afraid to ask, know where you want to go, and then figure out who are the people that might help you to get there, right?
That's good. Excellent. There's another question that I think is more related to the business, but I think it is a nice follow-on to that one also on a personal basis. And Larissa was asking about how often do you fail while looking for new ways or while experimenting with new methods? In other words, is failure a part of your process?
Definitely, it is. It is. I don't have a number for that, but often. I mean, it has to be often, right? And what's good about this whole method, right? And now Bill gave you, it's in the chat, so you can refer back to design thinking. There are a lot of resources on that if you want to read more about it. Also, Bill, if you want to share my email at a later point, feel free to do that. I'll be happy to take questions through email at a later stage. But failure has to be a part of this, right? And that sucks because, I mean, we've been taught from the beginning that failure is bad, right? I mean, when you were back in school, your parents wanted to know what your grades were, right? Maybe if they are paying for part of your studies, they might still want to know how you're doing, right? So that's not tied into a way to think about, try, prototype, see how it works, and learn from that, right? Which is the basic concept of all this, right? So I think we're geared, or maybe our chip from when we were born, we're taught that failure is bad, right? And that's where I think failure is good. We learn from our failures. We have to fail, right? Because if we're not failing, that's because we're not taking any chances. And if you don't take any risks, I mean, you're not gonna make it big, right? That's how it works. So failure is a big part of what we do. And I think what's important about the design thinking methodology as well, and tying it back to what I told you about prototyping as well, is that what happens is if you do it quick and dirty, you fail fast. So you don't fail when it's already in the market. You don't fail when it's going to get very expensive to fail, but you fail very fast in the process, right? But a lot of times what happens is that the failure actually converts itself into a learning experience. So it's not necessarily like, okay, my project failed completely. It's more as an opportunity to learn something new, figure out what twist to do to that, and then you could be back on your feet the next day or maybe in an hour's time with a new prototype that has all these learning experiences incorporated. So failure has to be there. It's important that you do fail, but don't see it as being something bad. See it as a learning opportunity. And going back to something I mentioned earlier as well, that's why it's very important to figure out, so if I don't succeed in this, what is it that I want to learn from this experience? If I'm testing this prototype, what would I like to accomplish as for learning goals? What is it that I would like to learn about the feasibility, about usability, about my project, and so on, right? Take it that way. Don't see it as something bad. It happens to us all, right? I mean, even in your careers, in your life, there are failures, right? Sometimes, but it's an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to get back up and go stronger, right? So it happens all the time. We have a project that fail every week, I would say. I mean, we have new projects going on all the time, right? And it is important that you also have a critical sense as to seeing, so is this failure something we want to learn off and implement some changes, or did we fail so that actually this is not feasible? And that's where the portfolio is important, because there will always be something else that you can start working on, right? So it's not just one product, it's not just one business. There are different options, there are different scenarios you can go about. And if you figure out that one was not the right one, well, no problem, right? You learned that, and great that you did learn it in an early stage and not when you launched it already. Because then you have the opportunity to correct the course and get back there, right, with something else that might work even better. So that's important.
Okay, great. I got a couple more questions. Simeon is wanting to know, how did you go about making connections in Guatemala? Did you find networking there difficult since you were from Denmark? And then how would you recommend that we establish those important professional relationships?
Right, that's a good question. I think it was hard in the beginning, definitely, right? Especially my relationship to Guatemala was from the beginning with my girlfriend, right? So what happens naturally, I think, is that you tend to get connected through that local person. And that happened a lot in the beginning, right? However, what I did see is that she didn't necessarily have contact. I was more on a friendship basis and so on, but she didn't necessarily have all the business contacts. So I think, obviously it depends a lot on how outgoing you are, how extroverted you are, and so on. But what I did a lot was that I tried to attend events. Actually, that's how I met Bill. I attended an open event where it was a learning opportunity, signed up. It wasn't that expensive. I was still in my MBA back then. And that's a great way, right? Making sure to introduce yourself. Bill had a great presentation down here, and I basically just went up to him and said, I like that a lot. I mean, thanks a lot, and we shared cards, and that's how it all starts, right? So I think what's important is if you want to get, and this goes for every country in the world, right? This is not just for Guatemala, but if you don't have the connections, first of all, figure out where you want to be, right? What is it that you want to accomplish? What people would you like to talk to? What would you like to learn about the local market? And then figure out where you can find those, right? There will always be trade organizations. There will always be lots of open workshops, open events you can sign up for. And there are a lot of organizations within the trades, right? So that might be a local marketing organization. That might be a local sales organization. Engineering, whatever your field of knowledge or expertise or maybe just interest would be. And also, what worked for me a lot was when I started studying down here as well. That's when I really expanded my professional network, because you get into a program where, obviously, I took the MBA as well as you folks are working on right now, and it's a very broad way of studying as well. So you meet a lot of people with different backgrounds in different companies as well. And what did work for me in the MBA was also I joined an MBA at probably the most prestigious university down here. It's a private university. It's the most expensive one. So I guess if you want to meet people that are successful in business, I mean, that's a good way to look as well, right? That's the place where you would be looking for these successful business folks, because they're the only ones that can pay for this continuous education and so on. So you have to be maybe a little strategic about it sometimes, but you have to know where you want to go, right? What is it that you want to learn? What people do you want to meet? And then figure out where they are, right? Or where they might be. And it's the same, right? Going back to the prototyping, try it out, right? I mean, I went to Bill's conference, didn't even know who he was. I didn't know a lot about the subject, but I took it as an opportunity to learn new people, learn a new subject, and just have a good time, right? And if that's the way you go into things, I think you can't go wrong. I mean, there will always be an opportunity to meet great people, always be an opportunity to introduce yourself, and it doesn't have to be taking advantage of the situation, right? If you sincerely just want to be there, learn something, meet some great people, I mean, that's what people will feel as well, right? And I think that's probably why Bill and I have had such a good relationship, even though we're a lot of miles apart, right?
Very good. Well, thank you. And we have one more question from Dee Dee at this point, and it's another really good one. She asks, what enhances your innovative thinking? As in, is there something that helps your creativity as a director of innovation and marketing that has to come up with something new? In other words, is there some magical trick, some exercises, some things that you challenge yourself to do to maintain that creative edge? And I'm sort of improvising a little bit on the question, but...
Right. No, great question. Certainly there is. I mean, I think the best suggestion I can give you is be as little behind your computer as you can and be as much in the field as you can. I mean, that is where you will see the opportunities, talk to the clients, talk to potential clients. And what I do is, Didi, going back to that question, is I try to keep myself up to date on what's going on. I signed up for a lot of different blogs, different websites, Harvard Business Review. There are loads of resources out there, right? Even you guys being in the university right now, you probably have access to a lot of databases and so on for free, right? So try and figure out what those resources are. And if you have a very tight agenda, as some of you, I'm sure you have already, right? Then make time to every week to get up to speed, get up to date on the new things. Take an hour a week, take 2 hours a week to research about new lectures, new books that might be out there, find good blogs and so on. And there are loads of resources, right? So I think if you wanna be in an innovative mindset, well, you have to be looking at new things constantly, right? So challenge yourself to try new things, push yourself out of your comfort zone. If you don't like talking to people, then try and talk to people, right? If you love to talk to people, then maybe challenge yourself to just go and observe them someday, because that might be hard if you're a good talker, right? And make sure you're constantly on the lookout for new lectures, new books, and so on, right? And there are loads of those. If you stay in touch in some of the LinkedIn groups, I don't have a name coming up right now, but if you look for design thinking, innovation, marketing, whatever might be your topic of interest, there'll be loads, right? And what those folks will be talking about are different new things all the time. There'll be discussions, and you can even be proactive about it and go in there and just ask, right? Like, what are your top 10 business books about innovation, and see what the folks would come up with, right? So I think that's what I've been doing my whole life up till now, and I keep doing that. Is just stay on the playing field, right? Make sure you're always up to date with what's going on. Read new books. Don't sit back and just say, okay, I took my MBA already. Now I'm there, right? I mean, look at yourself, maybe your life even as a prototype, right? Constantly, there's new ways you can do things. There are better ways. There are new things out there you can learn about. And if you have that mentality, I mean, you will be up to date all the time, right? So I think that's what makes the difference between the person that's being innovative, trying to challenge the status quo, and someone that's mainly sitting back saying, you know, oh, I'm already an expert. I've been in this for 10 years. I have my MBA, a master's already, so there's nothing more I can learn, right? I mean, we know that's not true. You guys know that's not true. That's why you're studying right now. So make sure you don't forget about that, right? When you get out there, start working, do your own enterprise, make time to look at those groups, make time to look at those newsletters, make time to look in Amazon maybe for new suggestions, and read books, right? I mean, take time out of your agenda. I do that every week. I do it every Monday morning. Normally, sit down and figure out, so how am I going to challenge myself this week mentally, and trying to figure out something, right? Maybe it's a book I want to read. Maybe it's a course I want to look into. Maybe I want to go to a course. Maybe I want to talk to someone that I know is already doing this, or something like that, right? Reach out to the people, and I mean, you can't fail. I mean, there's always something new, right? So if you go about it that way, I think you always stay up to date on what's going on, whatever your field of interest is, and that makes you very attractive as well. I think if you can get to an interview, or if you're looking for investors and they can see that you're looking at the newest, you have all the newest methods in place, you look at the new stuff, and you're doing something innovative, I mean, that's very interesting. I would appreciate a candidate like that if we were looking to hire someone in innovation, for example.
Well, good. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question, and we're going to let you go, because it's been about an hour of almost nonstop talking on your part, which is, I know, can get quite exhausting. But the final question comes from Ronte, and it's, again, a really good question. Basically, where do you see yourself from a business perspective in 5 years? I'm not sure. Malte, are you still there? We might have lost this connection.
Bill, can you hear me now? I think I was off for a few seconds there.
Yeah, the question was, where do you see yourself in 5 years from a business perspective?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of things in the pipeline right now. Obviously, one big issue that will always be there when you're an expat and you're living somewhere else is if you're going to be maybe looking at going back to where you're originally from, right? And I think, I mean, I'm very happy about what I'm doing here right now, and there's not a lot of ways I can grow further as for structure, because I'm in the board of directors right now. So I think my next challenge would probably be, and this might be within Grupo Entero even, right? Trying to figure out at some point what might be a good fit as for a new business unit that I might be able to take the lead on, a new project, a new business unit, something going on, right? Where I would have the full control over that, and I think that would be the next challenge for me, because I've been in a lot of positions where I've had a part of the responsibility. Right now I have a great position. It's a very challenging job because I have to create systems and push them out to all the stakeholders in the company, and that's a very nice thing to do. If you like that, you have to be on the lookout constantly. But I think the next challenge for me at some point would be, to take a lead on a project and probably like a new business unit. So that might be something I would do on my own, or it might be something within the group, right? So that depends a lot on what would happen in 5 years, right? On a personal note, I think like what Guatemala has is a very high crime rate. So there's always this consideration, right, about would you like to have, we don't have any kids yet, is this the place you want to have kids forever? Would you look at something else? And I guess in my shoes right now, I have to be willing to adapt a little bit, right? So I might have to look at that. But I think what I see as the challenge I'd like to take on is being able to take the full lead on a project as a business, a new business, and not only seeing it from the marketing perspective or from the innovations perspective, but having the CEO hat and having to juggle all these balls that you already have in a company, right? I think that's where I would like to see myself in 5 years, achieving something like that, either on my own or within the company, right? Which is definitely a huge challenge. I work with CEOs every day. I know it's a big challenge. They're the folks that sleep the least in the company, the most stressed out. But again, I mean, everything that happens is because of you, right? I mean, you're the final person there, right? So everything comes back to you. You're the responsible person, and I think that's a nice challenge. I'd like to do that sometime.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know we kind of probably rushed you home to get here because you're about 2 hours. I think it's 2 hours difference now to Guatemala since we've had the time change here. But I really appreciate your participating and a lot of great responses. Really good questions from the students and great responses and great insight. So thanks. And tell Maria I'm sorry I was a little late getting to her. But I'm going to sign her up for a future class at some point in time because I think what she's doing in the wine industry, from what she was telling me, and based on her interview online as well, that a lot of neat stuff going on there too that would be very useful to share with our students and get them fired up. So
great. No, yeah, definitely, Bill. You're very welcome. Guys, hope you enjoyed what I had to share with you as well. I wish you the best of luck with your projects, and I mean, feel free to touch base with me, reach out. I'm sure Bill can share my email address. So if you have any questions at a later point, I'll be happy to join you again, or maybe through email if you have any specific questions, book titles, whatever might be helpful. I'd be more than happy to help you guys out.
Well, I'll take you up on that, Malte. I'll send your email around to them, and if they have any specific questions, they can certainly contact you directly. And I really appreciate you making the offer and taking the time. And we'll talk to you soon. All right?
Great. Thanks a lot, guys. You have a great night.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay, for the rest of the class, if you've got any other questions, it can be related or not. It can be related to any of the assignments. For this week, we have the 1-minute elevator pitch. Also, one thing I do want to point out pretty quickly is, and I'm going to take control here for half a second. I'm going to click on the web, and I want to show you a resource that I guess has been sort of underutilized. I'm not sure how many people have been using this. It's going to pop up in a new window, so you may have to look at your browser to see it. Give me a check mark if you see the YouTube page, or an X if you don't. Again, you're going to have to look on your browser to see. Has it not popped up properly yet? Okay, so it looks like it is popping up for some of you. And you'll see there's my smiling face there next to for my students. Uploaded videos, 33 of them. What I've got in here are, and I do have most of these embedded in your course, and these are interviews with a wide range of entrepreneurs. And I don't have the not-for-profit sector covered quite as well yet, although I have lots of contacts and connections there. I just haven't gotten around to them. But if you click on any of them, like I guess I'm going to try to do a better job, or not guess, I'm going to try to do a better job, but I'm going to try to do a better job of labeling them, so maybe you can look at the ones that are most interesting to you. But, for example, at the top you have Eric Worcester, and the way this is laid out, or these are the most recent videos. I interviewed Eric and Greg Hake yesterday at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Derek and Danielle Case of Dress Up, which is a retail shop with 5 stores. It's only 2-3 years old. You can click on any of them. I also have any presentations, like there's an introduction to forecasting, to consumers and target markets. Chris Nordholtz from Full Media, overview of the definitive business plan. So there's lots and lots of these resources. I have a few travelogue resources as well, but most of them are related to entrepreneurs and business people. That short stories, most of them range, well, they all pretty much range between about 4 and 11 minutes. I've tried to keep them fairly short, but some of them go on a little bit longer because, quite frankly, I find them to be a little, fascinating. Eric Worcester, for example, is talking about the production side of things and manufacturing, and for a few of you, that's an important thing. His colleague and boss, Greg Hake, talks about vertical integration. They've got spas, they've got marketing arm, they have the production side, which Eric is currently fully immersed in. Then Danielle and Derek Case of Dress Up, it's a retail shop concept. They saw a niche opportunity, a need, and I know there's a couple of you working on these exact same kind of ideas in your markets. They see a need, and it's not being filled, and they've done a phenomenal job starting in 2009 of building this small empire, if you will. They've got 5 shops started in the last couple of years, and they're doing very, very well. I've got 2 teenage daughters, and that's part of their demographic is to target high school and college teen girls, teen women. And, I've never been in the shops myself, but I know my money has been. And, it's just this phenomena that's going on here in Northeast Georgia with these retail shops. And, who says it's a tough economy? Derek will tell you there's no problems with the economy. He's found an opportunity. He and his wife have found an opportunity, thanks to her sharp eye and his excellent entrepreneurial skills. The two of them have been able to, get a business going, and they now employ 35 or 40 people, maybe 8 of them full-time, and the rest are half to three-quarter time kind of employees. So, clearly they're impacting our economy, they're impacting our market, and, they're doing great things. So that's why when I review your projects, all of you have great ideas and great projects. It's a matter of really expanding your network, of continuing to work on getting your ideas, improved, and then ultimately making that go, no-go decision if that's what you want to do. So I just wanted to show you that resource because it is a good resource, and I've been working on it specifically on behalf of you in this class to try to give you a cross-section of people like Malte. You'll see Malte, you'll see his wife. She's got kind of a dark background, Maria, Director of Marketing, in there. And at your leisure, maybe loop back to it. There are links on the website to it, and you can go from there. So any other questions for me on any of the topics? If you do, let me go ahead and clear the checks real quick. If you have no more questions, please give me an X. Let's see, is there a due date for the assignment? What sources of funds can you identify to support your business plan? Also, this great assignment. It's a good question, Joseph. The due date is really the end of this week, and it's not a graded assignment in this case. I think I did that once before with a question. I have put in here a few discussion forum questions, and I'm glad that you guys are participating because they're really designed to help you out. One of the things that happens when you don't use a textbook is there are going to be some gaps in the information that you share. Now, I think our book covers most of those gaps very, very well, but it does require you to read it thoroughly and to look, at the sections because I'm not lecturing. I'm trying not to get into lecture. I'm trying to make this an applied course and trying to take a different approach to it. So, and honestly, as a graduate level course, my expectations of the effort you put into it is higher. So it's meant for you to help each other out. I am monitoring it. I'm taking a look at it. There's a growing list of excellent suggestions on sources of funds. So it's really meant for you. And if you participate, that's fantastic. If you don't, then that's your call. But maybe you can participate by just reading through it. And it gives you ideas about funding sources because there are some really good ones in there already. So it's not graded. Long-winded answer, I know. Any other questions that you guys have? I really appreciate you guys participating. Next week I've got Ron Simmons, who's the local director for the Small Business Development Center, which deals with all the SBA, Small Business Administration funds. That was one of the first things that people asked me the first week we did these web conferences, if we could get somebody from the SBA. I noticed in the funding section there were at least 2 or 3 comments about specific types of funds available through the SBA. So I've confirmed with Ron that he'll be available next week. I'm hoping to go over to meet with him briefly tomorrow to kind of bring him up to speed and also get him aligned technologically. And hopefully that'll be an excellent person to bring into the loop in another discussion like this. And then I plan on at least 1 more, maybe 2 more. We've got 3 more weeks, Wednesdays after this. Finish it up, so I may use all of them to have a similar style interview. If you found that it was valuable, could you give me a check mark? I'm assuming most of you did because you hung in there throughout the night. I know a few of you came and went, but was it valuable to have another perspective like this? Okay. I figured it was. Most people will drop out if they don't find some value in it, so it's kind of a loaded question. But thanks. So if there's no more questions, then we're good to go. And I appreciate your participation again. And just remember, when will grades be posted for the target market assignment from week 3? I'm about 2/3 of the way through grading them. I was trying to get through to them before tonight's class, so I wouldn't get that question, but I didn't quite get there. And it's 10 o'clock. I probably won't get them all done tonight. I'm old and I need to get some sleep. So it probably will be tomorrow that all of them are finally done, and they are done alphabetically. So, you're an R and you're probably down towards the bottom of the list, but I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. Okay. You do know on the grade book too that you've got to click on your grade, and then there's a place where you can go in and take a look at, any specific questions or comments that I have about why you got the grade you did. So I hope by now all of you know that you can do that, because I have had questions about, well, I got the grade, but I didn't get any comments associated with it. Well, I do take the time to put comments in, usually based on about 5 different criteria that I'm looking for. Excuse me. And so, I do get pretty specific on some of them when I feel like there's a need to. So, as always, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. I try to get back to you within a few hours, or worst cases, maybe 24 hours if I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball. But we're working on it. So otherwise, if you're all good to go, then great. We'll call it an evening. And again, I totally appreciate your participation. And we'll look forward to reviewing your stuff this week. I really look forward to your 1-minute elevator pitches. The big clue I'm going to give you for those 10 of you that have hung in here is don't go over 1 minute. I say that, and I say that I'm going to deduct a point for every second past 1 minute, and I'm serious about that. I want you to be up to 1 minute exactly. So practice a few times. Try to get your timing nailed down, and then go for it. All right. All right. If there are no more questions, then we'll call it an evening. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good night.